In earlier episodes, we've explored the organ repertoire of the English Robertsbridge Codex from the mid-14th century and of the Faenza Codex, compiled in Italy around 1430. Now we're going to move into Germany with a small source that is nonetheless very significant, the Tablature of Adam of Ileborgh. This is our earliest dated source of organ music. Ileborgh writes that he is a monk living in Stendal and that he has written these works in the year of our Lord, 1448. The tablature is important for containing the earliest organ preludes, preambula. It's also important as the earliest source to indicate the use of pedals on the organ. It also seems to be the earliest indication for adding ornaments on specific notes. So despite its small size, only 5 preludes and 3 settings of a German song, the Ileborgh Tablature is a significant source of late medieval keyboard music. We believe that these preambula were intended as intonations to set the pitch, presumably of vocal music or chanting for the church service. And Adam Ileborgh explains, as a title for each of these, that they are in a certain key and they can be varied or transposed to other key centers, which corroborates this view of the preambula functioning as intonations. Let's hear one of these, the preambulum in C, and for this I'll be using Principles 4 and the Gimshorn 2 on the top manual of the Fritts organ. The freedom of the rhythm suggests an improvisatory feeling. And the ornaments that I added are indicated, or I should rather say there's an indication to do some type of ornament on these notes by creating a little upswing on the stem of the corresponding note. Like the music in the Robertsbridge Codex, Ileborgh notates his tablature using letters for the lower parts and a staff for the treble part. This type of notation became known as Old German tablature because it incorporated both the staff for the upper part and the letter or tablature notation for the lower part or parts. The New German tablature that came into use in the second half of the 16th century used only letter notation. And this is, of course, the type of tablature that Buxtehude would have used for notating his organ music. But that's much later than the time we're in. And this type of notation is associated with the organ and is yet another reason why this must be organ music, especially with the indication for pedals. Now let's listen to another one of these preambula, which has the title good preambulum on C, or in the mode of C, for the manuals, and can be varied in many ways. So, unlike the one I just played, Ileborgh does not tell you exactly which different key centers or pitches this can be transposed to, but leaves that up to you. And for this, I'm going to use the 4 and 2 foot octaves on the grate of the Fritts organ. If I had a mixture that wouldn't require an 8 foot pitch, I would feel free to add that. And I've mentioned that it's possible to use upper work if you had a 1 foot or anything like that. I think to give the impression of a Blockwerk, but not based on such a low pitch. I think that could work very, very well for this. So here is the preambulum bonum, the good prelude. And it has, again, some unusual rhythmic groupings. You're going to hear the first grouping is in 5. It's 5 notes. Ending with a very full chord there, 4 voice parts. You'll notice the voice leading is not exact in these, but very, very freely he can add or take away voices, which is very typical of a keyboard prelude. And now, one of the 2 preambula that has an indication of using the pedals. This is the preambulum bonum pedale se manuale in D. So a good prelude for the pedals or manuals in D. Now he doesn't indicate exactly where the pedal would go, and indeed this starts with just 1 line of music in the treble and nothing underneath it. And then there's a fairly quick moving tenor line. So I'm wondering if perhaps what he means is that you could create a drone in the pedal for the first part of this, and then use the manuals for the second part. For this preambulum, I'll be using the 8 foot planum with the mixture on the grate, and then for the pedal drone, 16 8 and 4 foot principals, and I'm going to choose a drone up rather high to serve as a nice foundation, I think. I don't want the 16 to be too prominent. There's a lot of interpretation in that as to whether or not you think there should be a use of pedal, whether or not you think the pedal should be playing that tenor part once it starts moving. It's just a downward scale, so it's not anything terribly difficult, but it's in looking at the other preludes that don't mention the use of pedal, you might come to the conclusion that he doesn't expect you to play that type of tenor line with the pedal, but rather add a drone for that. It's very interesting that the notation of the Ileborgh Tablature, where you sometimes will have 2 parts in the left hand, presumably, notated in tablature, and then the top voice notated on a staff, suggested to the eminent musicologist Willy Apel that perhaps this is also an early example of double pedaling. And I want to illustrate this in yet another of these preambula. This one simply entitled Preambulum Super D, A, F, and G. So he just gives you all the possibilities for transposition. And it basically has a very simple tenor. There are two voices, a nice open fifth, and then a move to a major third, and then that open fifth again. And Appel suggested that this may be intended for double pedal. So I'll demonstrate this using the same registration that we heard earlier. There's evidence for a sustained fifth sound in the pedals on the earliest surviving keyboard in Norrlanda, Sweden, the Norrlanda organ that was originally built for a small church on the island of Gotland off the eastern coast of modern-day Sweden. And this instrument did not survive with its pipes intact, but with its action intact, and the keyboard and pedal board intact, and it has been moved to the National History Museum in Stockholm. This organ has a very interesting arrangement for the pedals, because we can tell from the action that each of the 8 pedal keys actually activated pipes a 4th or 5th apart simultaneously, so that you would be getting these types of drones by just playing one pedal note. And Pretorius, writing in 1619, speaks of an old tradition of playing open fifths in the pedal. So all of this may be related to the presence of open fifths in a couple of the Ileborgh Preambula. Another interesting link with evidence in Pretorius is the possibility of isolating the top voice on a different keyboard. Pretorius, writing in 1619, includes a woodcut of the old organ in Halberstadt Cathedral. And this organ had 3 keyboards and a pedal board. And the top 2 keyboards basically were a way to separate the mixtures out from the foundations. So the top keyboard played the foundations and mixture together. And the second keyboard played only the foundations. So this would be a way of creating one line with a very strong mixture, Blockwerk sound, and accompanying it with foundations. The third keyboard played, it was a different type of key. It played an octave lower than the upper 2, providing an octave lower with just the foundation sounds, and then the pedal board was the same range as that third keyboard and permanently coupled to it and played the mixtures. So you had a number of possibilities for isolating foundation stops from mixtures. And so this also could be a possibility, which I can demonstrate on the Fritts organ by using the 8 and 4 foot principles of the great, like the lower keyboard, or the second keyboard of the Halberstadt organ, and then having the Blockwerk with the mixtures on the top keyboard, and giving this sort of impression. So the Ileborgh Tablature is a source that raises a lot of fascinating questions about the state of keyboard playing in the middle of the 15th century.